So lately I've been watching the new Netflix adaptation of Cowboy Bebop, and much like most other people who have seen it, I have very mixed reactions towards this show. On the one half you have a fun-loving homage to a classic anime to provide new intrigue and insight into Watanabe's classic. And on the other half, what potential there was for quality content is replaced with some cringeworthy writing, unnecessary padding, and woke tokenism. I believe it's gotten to the point where even some woke critics begin to complaining about this representation, but I'll get more into that later. Thou might need booze to get through these real folk blues. Let's get through this, shall we? This Netflix adaptation adapts Cowboy Bebop, the beloved classic by Shinichiro Watanabe, and a timeless classic television show that combines Western and Eastern elements together and a whole mishmash of genres into a cohesive whole that provokes a poignant message. This Netflix adaptation takes heavy influence from the original show and the movie that came with it. The story, just like the original anime, is set in the not too distant future where humanity has colonized into outer space, harnessing technology capable of traveling to distant planets which would take years to do through lightspeed tunnels, mainly because Earth is lacking resources. Crime is rampant throughout this universe, especially the Syndicate, which takes more of a center stage compared to the anime show. Bounty hunting is legalized, and the profession is known as cowboy. You have the ever-cool Spike Spiegel, a laid-back yet very skilled martial artist played by John Cho. He works with his partner Jet Black, the captain of the ship Bebop, played by Mustafa Shakir. Faye Valentine, a sassy bounty hunter played by Daniela Pineda. The three of them team up and encounter all kinds of colorful friends and foes alike, and together they team up to try to gain bounties by hunting down criminals, terrorists, and mass murderers alike. Yet in a now more prominent subplot, Spike's past may be catching up to him quicker than he thinks. As Spike's former partner from the Syndicate, Vicious, plots to take over the Syndicate and kill off Spike, all whilst claiming Julia is his wife, Spike's past girlfriend, who he still deeply loves. Now I've heard complaints left and right that people say it's too different, but others saying it's actually a bit too faithful to the source material. Let's find some equal ground here. Can we all just mutually agree that Session 0, the teaser trailer, was the best session in the series so far? Looking at this teaser trailer, it got everything right about Cowboy Bebop whilst doing its own unique different thing. That was the type of quality I wanted for the rest of the series. That was the type of quality I wanted to see in the rest of the series. Look at this teaser again. You can see they got the casting on point, the acting was great, the visual, the action-packed violence, the camera angles, the timing of the music worked brilliantly for stylized filmmaking. Of course, you can't have the camera go flying back and forth all over the place all the time, otherwise we'd get exhausted. But I had a lot of fun watching that teaser trailer, and I was expecting that kind of fun quality for the rest of the series. I heard from the creators that they wouldn't make anything as perfect as the anime series. And yeah, it's pretty much common sense that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yet they said this would be a fun, loving homage to the anime, or something along those lines. And given the quality of that teaser trailer, that's exactly what I wanted. The teaser gave sort of a 60s Batman vibe. And if it sucked, I would have at least wanted to have some fun. Except, the major problem with the series is that only about half, if not less, had that fun, stylized quality that I was looking for in the teaser. The other half, if not more, of this series that Netflix has made consists of unnecessary pandering and lesser quality that didn't really need to be there. So because of this, most of the episodes sadly didn't work as a whole, but there were some episodes that actually worked. Let's just start from the beginning, shall we? The first episode opens up with an homage to the opening scene from the Cowboy Bebop movie. Except now, instead of a grocery store, it's a casino in space! And at first it had the fun stylized action I was looking for. And everything from the casting to the action to the music was on point and felt like Bebop. Although the dialogue did have a bit of excessive language. And there are people who have stated that Spike casually walking into a casino is vastly more suspicious than casually walking into a grocery store like he originally did. Not to mention when a bad guy blows a hole in the wall and Spike, Jet, and the Bounty are almost sucked into outer space. It's questionable about how there was a convenient safe door close for that particular wall. I mean, it's fantastic that it exists, but why not all the other walls if that's how you're gonna design it? Why that mundane wall? Why not the other gateways? Why not the doors? Why that wall? Whatever. Spike says the line, just a humble bounty hunter, man. We get the flashy intro, which actually works quite well. It's interesting when you notice the background of the original anime show, you'll notice these English words describing what Cowboy Bebop as a whole is about. And yet in this American show, you have Japanese words in the backdrop. And then instead of a predominantly Japanese title with the English bit in the middle, now you have a predominantly English title with a Japanese bit in the middle. That was a fun little observation. Not to mention there's many little Easter eggs and cues, and not to mention there's many mentions of other names and other events that happened in the original show if you're looking carefully enough, like Mushroom Samba in a restaurant menu somewhere. The rest of the episode is pretty much a shot-for-shot remake of the first episode of the series, except this time they threw in Faye in there, and some more scenes with the Syndicate. And right off the bat, this is where we start to see the chink in this show's armor. You see, the biggest problem with this series as a whole is its structure. In the original show, the structure and pacing was key to the storytelling that it had to offer. The original anime was both episodic and serialized, with only mild inconsistencies. Any backstory that would haunt the character's past would be mentioned here and there, but on the whole, it never revealed too much. It only gave you just enough to let you know what these characters were going through. And only showing tidbits of each of these characters' pasts actually works with the narrative in a metaphysical sense. The structure and pacing of only showing glimpses of the characters' pasts works in a meta-narrative sense. Because the main characters were running away from their past, so it makes sense that they'd want to ignore their pasts. Yet they find themselves in this limbo-like state of repeating the same thing over and over again, of trying to catch a bounty but usually failing. And they don't make any real progress with their lives until they confront their pasts, thus making the theme of moving on from your past that much stronger and deeply profound. Here, the characters having tricky pasts is shown to us, but especially for Spike Spiegel's case, they already give away much of what happened in the past right out of the gate. Instead of hooking us by only showing glimpses of the past to begin with and then fully revealing bits of the past by the end, because it reveals too much right out of the gate, that meta-narrative harmony doesn't work like it did in the original. Unlike the original show, the Netflix adaptation gives us so many scenes that could have easily been cut out, and the story as a whole wouldn't have changed that much. Almost all the scenes in regards to the pub and the Syndicate could have easily been cut out, and it would have made for much more cohesive pacing. I know it's tempting for writers to fill in the blanks, but what they failed to realize is that the original creators of the original show let the audience fill in the blanks. If you're writing a story, you always need to remember your audience are not dimwits. Yes, the original anime show may not have told us everything about Spike's past with the Syndicate, but it told us everything we needed to know. Thus, all the mysterious parts can be up to the audience's interpretation, and they can put the pieces together with the important stuff that they left in. This technique of storytelling that I've been educating myself with as of late, I'm going to term it trimming the fat. I was watching this video by Gaming Wins in his analysis of Shadow of the Colossus and why he loved it so much. And one of the reasons was that Team Ica was very good at taking a story, cutting out all the fluff and all the fat out to leave the most important parts and focus more on the emotional impact. That's what the original show was really good at. Unfortunately for this new show, it gives us a lot of excessive fat that really didn't need to be there. More often than not in this Netflix adaptation, these creators of the Netflix show underestimate the power of show don't tell. At the end of the first episode, instead of this look between Spike and the woman who's running away, they try to talk each other out of it. And it's for this reason the show really suffers when it drags out unnecessary exposition in the pub and Syndicate scenes. If I was in charge of editing, I would keep certain character development scenes, like when Vicious is forced by the Syndicate to pull a trigger on Julia to showcase his loyalty to the Syndicate. Keep in some key scenes like Julia discovering that Spike's still alive, or when Spike reunites with the pub owner, and of course when Vicious takes over the Syndicate.
Is there a captain here who still has the courage to do his lord's will?
You wish now that I had died and Boromir had lived?
Yes. I wish that.
Those scenes I could happily keep in, but the rest of the pub and Syndicate scenes can seriously be taken out. There's far too much unnecessary exposition, and even if the exposition was needed to understand certain things later on, it kills the pacing of what's also happening in the same episode. And so because of that, the show doesn't even work on an episodic basis. Because on the one hand, you got Spike and the crew hunting down these bounties, but then all of a sudden, we get some unnecessary exposition scenes. Oh, but wait, in the first several episodes or so, after episode 1, Spike and the crew seem to have mixed plans on hunting the bounty or not hunting the bounty or chasing this trail to get a dog. Their methods of catching bounties is not made altogether clear, and so there's a huge lack of focus even on an episodic basis. It's not that I wasn't able to tell what was going on, it's just that the pacing was very poor compared to the original quality of the original. Another problem I have with the show is the writing. Of course, being a remake as it is, it's going to borrow some of those classic lines from the original, that's where it gets pretty good for the most part. It also depends on delivery, you see. And for the most part, the bantering between the main characters does genuinely work. And there were a few comedic scenes that genuinely made me laugh. I'll mention that later. But on the other hand, the writing can get into the category of cringeworthy. Probably one of the worst lines in the entire show is after Jet says to a flirtatious woman, sounds to me like blackmail, she responds, "Oh, Jet, you are black and you are male." Ugh. That is one of many examples of woke tokenism that's pandering to the audience. That's probably one of the worst examples. And this cringeworthy quality of writing can downright ruin the reputation of some characters. Take Vicious, for example. And this is why that trimming the fat technique earlier was so crucial to the original, but they failed to apply it here. Vicious in the original was ominous and downright scary. Even though he doesn't get much character development, you get a sense that Watanabe intended him to be a sort of less is more type of villain. Someone who exists more as a symbol of the evils of Spike's past more than an actual character. And in a way, this lack of humanization further cements him as a villain that Spike must conquer. A sort of unrepentant evil that the repentant Spike has to deal with. Here, this Vicious is not ominous, but rather very childlike and immature. Now, I can understand that when you're a criminal like Vicious, the angst of pride can make one very angry when that pride is challenged. But oh boy, is that anger full of hammy acting on part of the actor who plays Vicious. But oh boy, that anger has a lot of hammy acting to it. Although, to be fair, this hammy anger could probably work in short bursts, again, cutting out the vast majority of Syndicate and shit. Again, cutting out most of the unnecessary exposition would have helped to further cement Vicious as a legitimate threat, rather than an angsty, overgrown teenager. And maybe more consultants with Shinichiro Watanabe would have helped in this department. This very questionable writing and this lack of focus and very poor pacing leads to an experience that can be quite awkward to go through. Wait, time out. Where did the title come from? That title! Wasn't that meant to be edited in earlier? In this session? What? No? You're just gonna put the titles in, like, right near the middle of the episode? Or a quarter of the way through? When the events were already established? Doesn't that just add to the odd pacing? Are you sure you want to go through that? Okay, just thought I'd ask. So I've rambled on about this show's weaknesses for some time, but on the other half, this show does have some moments that actually work. First and foremostly, it looks like Cowboy Bebop. It captures the tone of being dark and gritty yet very colorful at the same time. The costume department and set designers have done an excellent job at recapturing the bebop look, even down to the minute techniques of the ships they fly. The sets, the costumes, and the actors are not exactly meant to look like the original Cowboy Bebop, yet it's different enough to provide its own variation. These actors are almost perfectly cast, and the roles that they've been given, they play excellently. It's clear that these actors and actresses do care about the roles they play in. Well, I assume most of them do. John Cho perfectly captures that laid-back attitude Spike Spiegel has. Mustafa was pitch perfect as Jet Black. His mannerisms, the way he acts in the show, even down to the voice, which heavily resembles the English voice dub actor of Jet Black from the original anime show. I'm honestly a little bit mixed on Faye Valentine, but for the most part, she plays her role well. And honestly, any complaints about race swapping or he's too old or whatnot, I honestly don't care. Why? Because unless you're trying to make something that's historically accurate, as long as you can get actors that can capture the spirit of the character they're playing as, then the audience will buy into it because it's believable. See, the thing about acting is that even if your resemblances don't look that much like the character you're portraying, it's all about conveying yourself to make that role believable. For example, back when I was attending Eden Court Theatre quite frequently before the pandemic, my theatre group put on a Christmas Carol show, and I was playing the lead role as Scrooge at about the age of 18. I look nothing like Scrooge right now, of course. By putting on this face and this voice, I made the audience be fooled into thinking I was older. Or take a look at these images I've put of myself dressing up as Spike Spiegel. I don't look like Spike Spiegel. I don't even have his brown eyes. I'd need contact lenses for that. But I understand the character. And for the most part, I have most of his physical attributes. So by that logic, most of the actors and actresses have been cast very well in their roles. And each of the characters has some new changes that I think make sense for the characters. For example, Spike Spiegel, back when he was in the Syndicate, was named Fearless. I felt this change made a lot of sense, because it does rhyme and fit in with the other name of a member of the Syndicate, Vicious. And the term Fearless, for the most part, really suits Spike's character. He's this daredevil with a laid-back attitude, and he has very few things to fear, so it makes sense that he's been given that title. Other changes I liked was making Jet Black a father figure. Quite literally this time. As in this show, Jet Black has an ex-wife and a daughter he calls Bean. This made for some truly heartfelt moments, and did lead up to one of the funniest scenes in the entire show where Jet has to call in with this holographic technology to catch up with his daughter's show. In the middle of the phone call, Jet's having the time of his life seeing his daughter perform on stage, whilst in the background, Spike, who is just chilling out, is suddenly fighting some bad guys in the background, and Jet Black's completely oblivious to this. That honestly made me laugh. And giving Jet Black a daughter managed to raise the stakes much more personally in the finale. In the final episode, they do an homage to the Ballad of Fallen Angels fight from Cowboy Bebop. Except instead of taking Faye Valentine as a hostage, they take Jet's daughter as a hostage. This works excellently into playing up more drama, and raises the stakes as Jet's got something to lose in this too. I also like the stylized split screen action that happened in one scene in that episode. I wish there was more of that throughout the show. Another change that I didn't mind that much was giving more screen time for Jet's colleagues at the police force. It allows Jet to form this bitter relation with this man who's now married to his ex-wife. It's understandable then that Jet would see him as somewhat of a jerk, but fortunately the show does show this man in a positive light at times. And despite his excessive language, Jet is willing to take good care of Spike and Faye, to the point of even inviting them to play bowling with him, and provide a birthday surprise for Faye. That new scene, I really liked. And I know some people were mildly annoyed by this, but I actually really liked the scene when he went through the plan to take down LeFou over and over and over again. I found that quite fun to watch, and adds a bit more characterization to Spike when he hacks the Bebop ship so they won't follow Spike to go through with the plan. In fact, come to think of it, I think episode 8 is the best episode in this series. There's no scene in that episode that felt like a waste of time. What screen time we do get with Vicious and the Syndicate actually matters this time. The villain, Paul LeFou, is portrayed excellently here, especially when he says the Blade Runner villain's monologue in French as he sees a clown costume. It felt funnily soulful, and it made me feel a lot of sympathy for this man. You might say sympathy for the devil. Other villains were treated with less love and attention. Some villains were there and then they were gone the next, which is why I had a bit of a problem with the first few episodes. Although the eco-terrorists were quite effective as villains for the most part. They had an interesting new change in that instead of this weapon that they had, which turned people into monkeys, they have this biochemical gas that torturously transforms people into trees, killing them in the process. It's both very messed up, but also provides some genuine world-building insight into how this ecosystem in this universe works. So in other words, any of the changes that complemented the characters, providing things that were different enough, yet still recognizable, those kind of changes made sense to the show. Honestly, I was expecting the vast majority of the episodes to be paced somewhat like episode 8. I think if every episode was like episode 8, this show could have done really well. More focus on a bounty of the week, with only occasional scenes, which importantly built up to the climax of the show. Speaking of the climax, for the most part, it's a brilliant homage to the original Ballad of Fallen Angels fight, with a few new variations, and arguably, whether intentional or not, some more religious symbolism. Like when the evil minions purposefully step on a Bible as they approach Spike and Jet. Some could interpret that as Netflix stomping on the original anime show, but in the context of the show itself, it would make sense in this crime-ridden world where so many criminals are wanting to be their own gods. And there's a plot twist that happens right at the climax of the fight, which on the one hand I think is quite clever, provides further insight into a certain character, and did have some build-up, but on the other hand, some could say it kind of came out of nowhere. Spoilers! So right as Spike and Vicious do that famous pose from the original show, with some gruesome sound effects, might I add. The sound design's also really great, I think. Julia comes in to shoot Vicious. Sick and tired of all the abuse that she had to put up with. Sick and tired of all the abuse from Vicious that she had to put up with. That makes sense, as there was a lot of build-up to that. But then she plans on taking over the Syndicate. And Spike and her could rule the Syndicate together as husband and wife. Julia wanting to take over the Syndicate... I can understand why fans would say that just kind of came out of nowhere. But to be fair, there were hints that Vicious, other colleagues, and Julia were making plans to take over the whole Syndicate. So, not completely out of the blue, but still I can understand why people would say that would be out of character for Julia. So regardless of the case, Spike deeply disapproves of this, which leads to, big shock, Julia shooting Spike and launching him through the window of the church. Cue the Green Bird music and the flashbacks. And the acting and the editing here, for the most part, works great. And seeing how there's hopefully going to be some more seasons, hopefully better ones, and with the hopes that this show is going to get better, please, we could have some fascinating dives into what if Julia took over the Syndicate. We could have a fascinating parallel timeline of what if Julia took over the Syndicate. And there's a new type of drama at play as Spike is downright heartbroken as he stares at Julia whilst he falls out from the church window. But the rest of the drama from there on, I feel rather mixed on. Because it plays out, the team splits apart, but seeing how there's gonna be seasons later on, you know they're gonna get back together. And you know, speaking of getting a team back together, I wonder where Ed has been. Where has she been all the time? Okay, all jokes aside, I'm sure the young actress who's portraying Ed here is having the time of her life and is very excited to be a part of this project. And we've only seen about a minute or so of her on screen, so it's probably too soon to judge. But from what we've seen so far, I don't think I could safely say I blame the actress. Because looking at her performance, I can see that she's genuinely trying. Now, I'd put the blame on the direction here. You see, child acting requires very special direction to pull off, because it's not so much that children are incapable of acting, far from it. It's just that children require direction in order to make for more genuine performances. If I were directing that scene, I'd probably start off with an entrance of her doing a funny walk, and then seeing Spike out of curiosity, and then out of childlike curiosity, poke Spike to wake up. That would have made for a more easy introduction to ease the audience into this character first. Starting the character off with an in-your-face close-up, as well as the general live-action obstacle of trying to recapture movement from animation, made for quite an awkward introduction to Ed. And that's how the show ends. Oh, also, side note. You know the little taglines that say, "See ya, Space Cowboy," or something along the lines of that? There's one flashback episode in episode 9, and the end title of that one is, "You're gonna carry that weight." This made me literally say, "Oh, come on!" Why? Because that tagline in the original show was used for the very last episode, as if to indicate to the audience that you are going to carry the weight of what you saw for the past several hours. The original show worked in a meta-narrative sense, which is what the Netflix adaptation fails to do. This tagline isn't used for the final episode as if it was a message for the audience. It's used to coincide with exposition that for the most part was already established to us. Mostly because the flashback episode, to be fair, does reveal the full context of Spike's past. But again, the exposition of the show doesn't work, because it's too excessive to have any sense of relevancy to the plot. Thus, when they use the line, "You're gonna carry that weight," it ironically doesn't carry the weight. The profoundness of moving on from the past is lost in this adaptation. And on that regard, this show is kind of an insult to the original anime. What's also an insult is the way they mishandled some characters. However, all is not lost. This is still just the first season. These characters that I've mentioned, whether it be that side character or Vicious, still have the potential to grow. If the creators of the Netflix show take the criticism constructively and improve, because Netflix is genuinely capable of making good quality content. They really are. But there's something about this show I've noticed. Whenever I get away from the Netflix adaptation and go back to the original show, which funnily enough is also being played on Netflix by the way, it's like I'm stepping out of a building that I've been in for too long and soaking in the fresh air. That's what watching the original anime show feels like after watching the Netflix adaptation. So I understand that all the people involved with the Netflix adaptation, I would assume, at least try to make a loving adaptation of Cowboy Bebop. That's why, for all its problems, I don't think I can get entirely mad at this show. Like, even the directors, the writers, and that guy I mentioned earlier who plays that one side character have all explained their deep appreciation for the original anime. There was something rubs me the wrong way when they said that they were fixing the original anime show by replacing the elements that were quote-unquote problematic.
I think I can smell shite.
But believe me, I have seen far worse remakes. Far worse. So how would I rate this Netflix adaptation of Cowboy Bebop? For now, I think I'm going to give it probably a 5.8 out of 12. As there are plenty of elements in the show that genuinely work. But for the most part, yeah, you're better just sticking to the original. Oh, there's one other thing that I think I should point out. Before the show was released, the actress who played Faye Valentine was pointing out that people wanted the original costume back, but the reason they made Faye's costume the way that it was to make her skin less exposed. So understandably, there'd be more focus on Faye as a character rather than as an idol for people to fetish over her feminine body. That's understandable, but when you watch the show, there is literally a scene of Faye making love to somebody half naked with a sheet. Irony 101. So if any of the Netflix employees happen to watch this video, please take this criticism constructively. I wish no ill will towards any person involved with this project. Just please try to improve for season 2, okay? In the meantime, ScotsThinker signing out.
Most people are so ungrateful to be alive, but not you. Not anymore. Game over.